to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. Today, I am excited to welcome to the show a longtime listener, Cleo Poli. Cleo is from Paris, but has traveled the world and has lived in several different places around our globe. She worked as an interior designer in London, but she moved back home to Paris when she found out she was expecting a baby. It was there that she discovered her niche, her Fred Berns only, serving English-speaking clients in France. Now, we all know that design is all over the globe, and not just here, not just Paris, not just anywhere else. But the thing is, it turns out that there are some unique differences in Paris to design, not just in the pricing style, but in the types of projects that are in demand and the clientele, and also the very essence of what interior design is and how a designer is able to work in Paris as a designer. It's interesting. I can't wait for you to hear it. Now, today, Cleo is here to share what she learned embarking on an interior design career in Paris, in establishing and developing her niche, and in serving an unfulfilled need for English-speaking clients. She's learned a lot along the way, and I think you're going to find her story very intriguing and helpful, both because of the similarities and the differences that she has faced in her journey. Now, before we get to meeting Cleo, I'd like to take a minute to thank our show sponsor, Kravet. Have you heard? The majority of Kravet Inc.'s products are in stock and ready to ship within days. Order your favorite patterns from Kravet's exclusive in-stock collections as well as their Modern Luxe line. Keep your design projects on track with Kravet Inc. Order memos today at Kravet.com. And don't forget to jot down this code, AWDB10. You can use this code for 10% off any one order of Kravet fabric, wallpaper, or trim. That's AWDB10. All right, let's talk to Cleo and see what she has to share about her niche and starting her firm in Paris. Hey, Cleo, thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So, Cleo, I think you're the first person I ever interviewed that's full live French Parisian lady.
Yep, the one, the only. There's no other than me.
I know. And the funny thing is I might have thought, like, I'm not sure, but you told me you've been listening practically from the first year, and you know you're the only one. So I'm like, okay, that's two of us that think you're the only one, right?
No, I'm probably your only Parisian guest, at least for now.
That's right. Let's just hope it's the first of many, right?
That's it, first of many.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we just said that, because I know in the off-air conversation, and I want to bring this up, you were mentioning that it is difficult to find a group of colleagues in Paris that are, like you said here in Anglo, you said in the Anglo point of view is collaboration over competition. Mm-hmm. And of course, our designers here know that as recently as 8, 10, 15 years ago, that was not true here either. Mm. But you're experiencing that by being in our Facebook groups and the different things. But I just wanted to say there has to be other French interior designers listening to the show, and you got to reach out to Cleo and get a little group going, right?
Give me a call. Find me.
Right?
Let's talk. I'm always looking for new friends, especially if you love to talk about design and business. I'm here for it.
Yeah. I think we got to try and hook that up. You'll let me know if anybody reaches out, okay?
Yeah, I certainly will.
Okay. So here's the thing, Cleo. You have your interior design firm in France, in Paris. You have a very varied background, a very, fun, interesting background, raised in France, raised in Paris, have met a very special person in your life, hopped around the globe, living in all different places, and then found out that you guys were planning to have a baby, and you did like most smart young women do, go back home to mom, okay,
That's
and
yep.
live where mom lives.
That was me coming
Exactly.
home running.
That's it. Like, I gotta need help with
I
this
mean, yeah,
human.
running's a big word, but I was 6 months pregnant, so I did my best.
Well, we know it's a good move, and I'm
Yeah,
sure your mom and your dad appreciated it as well, right?
they certainly did.
Yeah, yeah. So here's the thing though. You are back in Paris, and now you have niched your interior design firm into specifically working with English speaking clients. So tell me the how and the why of that. How did that develop, and why is that a thing for you?
Well, this whole thing kind of started when I was pregnant. I got pregnant in the UK, so we were living in London at the time, and I realized I needed a support system back in France. Being a first-time mom and all. So I was going back home, but I had been away from home for about 10 years. So I reached out to English-speaking communities back in Paris, so the expatriate groups and all these kind of things. I knew that there was a lot of whole support systems on Facebook and all these kind of things, as much for interior design that there should be for new parents. And my partner being Australian, I wanted to make sure he could enjoy the joys of becoming a new father too. So I found a nonprofit organization that was English speaking parents living in Paris, and then life came about. We had a kid. I made new friends and had my little network, which was great. And then actually COVID hit about
Mm,
when my kid was about 4 months old.
mm.
So we had nothing else to do, nowhere else to be than at home with our kids. So it kind of worked out in that way. And obviously, like, relationship was built already, and we had already a little community, and a friend kind of became a client. They were moving in. They were like, we knew you were doing this in London. You were doing interior design. Can you help us move into a new place? We don't know where to buy things. I was like, for sure, I'd love to do that. And then the word spread. And during the whole confinement situation, there was a point where the nonprofit that I was volunteering for also was doing online talks. And
Mm.
so the VP of events came to me and said to me, hey, you're an interior designer. Everyone's stuck at home. Do you want to tell them about how to make your interior design at home? Like, people would be interested about that because we're all stuck here and we're all stuck at home. So share your, your wealth of knowledge. So I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I'm not a guest speaker. I've never done this before, but she's like, yeah, you'll be fine. You can talk for a living. Like, the problem is to stop talking, not to start talking with you. So I said yes. And then, I don't know, there was not a huge audience. There was maybe 20 odd people in the audience. And out of those, I gave it a lash, and I was like, well, if you want to hear more from me, like, I can do a consultation for you. And I turned over a third of the audience into paying consultations.
Whoa.
So there was 8 people, I think, at the time, out of that, just out of that talk, that booked me in to come to their homes in between the two confinements. So I was like, okay, well, did not
Not
expect that
used to
one, but
nothing
okay,
here.
cool. That sounds great. And my partner told me at the time, well, you do a good job to F this one up, because the need is there and you're providing what they want. So up to you to make something out of it now. So he actually quit his job to look after our kids so that I could launch the firm.
Wow.
So yeah, so we were like, okay, there is a serious needs. There is definitely a group of people that I'm responding to what they're after,
Mm.
and also I'd love to do this. So happy days for everyone. And so yeah, so I did this whole thing. A few turned into projects, obviously. Um, and then I realized I kept on saying yes, and I had to learn to say no. So I did
Mm.
that. I said no. I stopped taking on projects. I kept the ones that were ongoing, and I launched the whole business side of things. So if you would have told me a few years prior to that I'd have my own business. It was never really an aim, but obviously
Mm.
I had the resources, and I had listened to the podcast already, and I had some support system around, so I knew there were resources that I could find in terms of, okay, how do I do this now? So I put a hold on taking on new projects, and decided to launch a business in France. I don't know if you know that, but France is very well known for loving administrative paperwork. It's like a national sport here. So
Oh,
if you told me I'd launch a business and I launch a business in France 5 years before that, I would have told you, no way, Jose,
not a
that's not
chance.
happening. Uh, but uh, but it actually happened, and went through a few months of nightmarish paperwork, but it happened, and then from there onwards it was happy days. We launched a lot of great projects, we worked for amazing clients, and I felt like I also, having had a past career behind me plus having the resources from what I had learned on the podcast, was also giving me the opportunity to know what I didn't want to do from the
Mm,
get-go, I think.
mm.
And it was the keys given from, you know when I told my partner, okay, let's actually do this. Let's change our entire life, whatever hell we thought we were gonna do. And obviously, the world has decided things were going differently. So what are we doing? Are we doing this? And I said to him, I love design. I love to be an interior designer. I love the idea of having a business. I already had a business mind of such. Both my parents were somewhat entrepreneurs as well. And I helped friends launch their businesses in hospitality and in different ways. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to walk around Paris with a color fan and kind of do my thing. I want to have a firm. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this properly.
Mm.
So we went all in, and yeah, and then there was me gone to realize that I had, the niche was there because they were my people. Like it was my own community back here.
Mm.
And so I didn't have to really look any further. And one of the things that I had learned from listening was, you know, have your niche, know what you're offering, and it was
That's
already there
awesome.
in front of me, so that was good. Yeah.
Yes. So when we've had the conversations on the podcast about niching down,
Mm.
often designers, you've heard them, they've said, I had the inkling, or I had the idea, or I had the desire, but making that leap to actually declaring this is what I do was often scary for many of the designers that went on the show. And it sounds like it for you, it developed, and then you just looked and went, oh, this is it. Now all I have to do is
Mm.
talk about it. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And I actually decided to, at the very beginning, niche even further down, just because I had heard so many times, you just gotta do the niching down. Like it's it like you don't need to do it all to, jack of all trade, master of none kind of thing.
Right.
So do the thing. And so we, at the very beginning, niche down to be servicing English speaking families in Paris. So we're working for parents only at the time. So then obviously, and then we were recommended from friend to friend, and now we're actually working for all English speakers in Paris, not just parents. But we have worked a lot for parents and done kids rooms, and and having this understanding of family living was a lot in our
Okay.
wording at the beginning. So obviously it was, we've changed our wording a little bit since, but again, what I said to my partner was like, the way I can figure that I can do this is I've listened to these women that have done this for 5, 7, 10, 15 years, and giving me all of the keys of all those things they've done wrong for the first 10 years or the first 6 years of their business. And I'm like, I know what I shouldn't do already for those, so I can skip this 5 years and try and skip already. But yeah, no, so taking all the big pointers of that from the get-go was definitely very helpful.
Yeah, no. It's funny because over the years, whether it's at a live event or on the podcast, I've had the opportunity to that similar conversation. It's like, I heard on your show that I should niche, that it's a good thing to niche. And I felt the fear, but enough people had done it before me and had talked about how the other side is so good that I just trusted and did it. Right.
Mm. Oh, exactly. And I mean, this is why, I have people asking me. So I've done two projects for French speakers. The first one was a woman that still had found me through our English speaking communities, but she was French. Her husband was French, but she was brought up with an au pair. So I told her from the get go, if
Oh,
you're gonna pay me hourly, trust me, I speak quicker in English. It's going to cost you less. So if I'm going to have to try and find my word in French, I've learned my trade in English. It's going to be much easier for you if we keep this in English. So our actual whole conversation the whole time was in English. And then we did another project for in-laws of one of my clients who were French. They both spoke excellent English. They had worked and lived overseas for years, because all of our we're very heavy on documentation and client process and all these kind of things.
Sure.
And I have decided, like even today, people tell me like your website isn't even in French. I said no, because we don't sell to French people. I don't need to, nor do I want to. So our entire process is in English, and again, we know what niching down, and I also know I'm saving efforts in having to translate this whole thing in French and having double the documents and having it's and my team is English speaking as well, so we do all this.
Interesting. You know how silly I am? I read your whole website. It never occurred to me that it wasn't in French. Like that there wasn't like the toggle to say in French or in English. Like, you know what I mean? Like, duh. Like, I just was like, here I am. I'm English speaking. Let's go read it. It's made for me.
Fair enough too. And like this, I think Google Chrome these days kind of does its wonders and do automatic translations. But
does it really? I didn't even know that.
I think so. I have a lot of English speaking clients that tell me that's fine. I've got the extension on Chrome or whatever it is for the French speaking websites. But I think French potential clients would have to do that to my website if they want to know what I'm on about.
That's it. Oh my goodness. Okay, so here's the thing. So you're servicing a clientele that's English speaking, and even if they're French, they have to do it in English, which is an interesting twist on that, right? You mentioned to me when we were talking before the show started how design, actually the business model of interior design, is very different in Paris. I don't know if it's throughout France than what we're used to over here. So run through the way it is there and give us the compare and contrast.
Yeah, so basically in France in general, so not just Paris, in France in general, there is very much the stamp of the architect. So there's a very well-regarded label of the architect, which is a very well-regarded profession, as it should be. And there is a subcategory of architecture, which is interior architecture, which is more or less what interior designers are in France. This being said, as an interior architect, what you end up doing most of the time, not for all interior architects, but for some of them and a big majority, will be to work out volumes, work out optimization of space often, because France and especially Paris has small spaces compared to you guys in the US. And obviously colors and wallpapers and all these kind of things that happens on the structure. And some of those interior architects will sometimes offer a fee or flat fee for decoration and then source items. But the actual interior designer approach, for what you guys call it in the US, will more be a decorator in France. Nowadays, it's been a couple of years, and I think obviously with the American approach and with Netflix and with the Anglification of all of our side of the world, there's been interior architect calling themselves designer d'intérieur, so creating a new label which comes and meets the interior designer term, which is obviously like a decorator with this understanding of construction, this kind of in between a decorator and an architect, which was, like, even for me at the beginning, hard to understand and define what is the difference between an interior designer and an interior decorator in English, so that I can understand it in French. And even these ones didn't cross over. So, and it was one thing that I was made aware of by actually the first interior photographer that we had booked in. So I had a few projects at the very beginning, and one of the great advice that I had heard from many of the shows was always invest in professional photography from the get-go. Don't the old do you good, which I did. And as soon as we had a few things going, I was able to shoot enough spaces. I booked in a great interior photographer, and she told me at the time, it was just between the two confinements again, and she told me, oh yeah, it's crazy because obviously post-COVID people understood that, wow, we're stuck at home, we don't have to live like this, let's do something about this. And she told me a lot of interior architects turned into interior decorator because the demand was so high, and
Okay.
they had no understanding of the space. She told me like the amount of time I shoot spaces where rugs are too small and are like case studies, like for interior
Oh,
designers, like because it's just not what their special skills are.
right.
Their special skills were understanding of space and volumes, and not necessarily the furnishings and fabrics and everything that goes around to make what happens within feel good. So she told me I've now learned new tips and tricks on how to shoot spaces where things were a little off, because now things were a little off.
Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
yeah.
So,
So it was interesting.
and so the thing is, so what if I want to just kind of clarify what I'm hearing? There's a thing here in the US where there'll be, are you a designer or a decorator?
Mm.
And, listen, like some people are of the frame of mind, unless you have a degree, you shouldn't say designer, you should say decorator, right? There's also the derogatory term, you're Debbie decorator or
Mm.
decorate, whatever. The thing about it is that you're not talking about decorator in the derogatory way. So I personally, just so I don't get 16,000 emails, I personally, you call yourself what you want to call yourself. I'm Switzerland on it. Okay. Like I literally look, I have not completed college. Has that stopped me from being a business owner of 3 different businesses? Like
Clearly not.
window treatment people, listen to me. There's no school for window treatment people. You're not going to tell me I'm not a window treatment professional. So
Yeah.
I have no problem whatsoever with someone who learns their craft and is accomplished at it. And whether you're a quote unquote designer or decorator, I would just want you to run your business smart, professionally, give a good product, give a good delivery, give a good service, a good experience, and make money for yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, it's such one of these charged conversations, right? So, but the point is for you, what I think I'm hearing is that pretty much pre-COVID, there was interior architect, which was designing the cabinetry and like almost like what we could think the parts of the building that are the part of the building. And there wasn't a lot of people who were doing what you call interior decorator, because in that world in France, decorator means the person who advises you on the furnishings and the rugs and the lamps and all of those things. So it has nothing to do with I'm an interior architecture and I'm who I think I am, and you're an interior decorator and you're not one of me. It literally is just what they're called. And there was a lack in the lane of providing the furnishings is what you're describing. I think is that what I'm hearing, Cleo?
Yeah, exactly. But there is also, and to the same line of what happens in the US, the decorator in French also is kind of that derogatory term as well. That's
Oh,
that's
okay.
what happened too. So in the
Okay.
same line of like what the interior designer would be in, like it's like if interior designers in the US would be coinciding with an interior architect in the US. That would be the same line of work. And
Right.
then and the decorator is always the one at the bottom going like, oh, you either didn't do the same degree or you didn't, like, it's kind of like, oh, she's only just a decorator. And
Right.
so it was my understanding, as much as in the US, interior architectural firms, interior designers and or decorators work coincidentally on projects
Mm,
very often.
right.
And in France, this is not really something that you'd see happening. So
Oh, so
you'd book
that's a
in an
distinction.
architect. Yeah, you'd book in your architects or interior architects, and they'd work your entire interior. You wouldn't, very rarely, really rarely, I've ever heard. I've never actually heard of projects where, unless it's a building or something like this, but
Mm-hmm.
very rarely you'd hear of an interior architect working alongside a decorator to bring the best
Oh,
of the space. This
oh.
isn't a, it's
So
not a
where did
collaborative work.
people, yeah, so where did, if I am living in Paris and I do need an architect to design the layout, but then I do need somebody to help me find the luxury furnishings and source the interior assets for the space, how does that happen if that interior architect is not doing that?
So some interior architects do,
Okay.
some do and are specializing with furnishings as well within their firms, but they're not a majority. And then you could also find high-end interior decorators.
Okay.
that would service in that sense, but they wouldn't. It'd be much harder for you to be able to find that middle ground. So
Right.
say you'd like to meet up on like brands like that go from like trade vendors and high end to mid range, where you'd go
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know, Crate and Barrel or CB2, these kind of things. That world doesn't exist. Like there's no in between.
Oh,
So you'd be able to book in, like if you want an art curator and an interior decorator that is going to meet a very high end budget, then that world
you
you'd
could
be able to
find
find.
that.
If you're just one of you and I, and just would
Regular
like to,
Joe.
yeah, you're just
I want
regular
our
Joe,
house to
would like,
look good.
I'd say you just want to, some performance fabric on your couch because you got 2 dogs and 3 kids, and like, well, that's good luck to you.
Right, right. Okay, okay. And so the thing is, with you having lived abroad so much for so many years, and obviously, like you've mentioned, listening to the podcast, your understanding of the Anglo business model. So you are, what's interesting is it makes sense to me if I'm from America or anywhere that has that model that we're so accustomed to here in America, where I can get a high quality person that's completely legit, that I recognize I need this expertise, but maybe I don't need the walls moved. I don't need the thing knocked down. And when I come to Paris, I don't again, it's egocentric, right? I don't know, I can't find it there. So of course, if you show up and then you're doing a business model that's similar to what I'm already accustomed to, yeah, it's a slam dunk, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course
Yeah.
it is. Like my first ever client here, which has now since moved back to the US, and that I cherish very much, her and her whole family. But she told me they were here on a contract for her husband's job, and they came and they were placed by a relocation agent, which happens very often in France, like for people moving for jobs, and you get relocated by an agent that works alongside your company, and that helps you set up administrative paperwork, but also finds an apartment, sometimes, most of the times, already fully furnished.
Hmm.
Um, so we've actually been called very often because people are moving into fully furnished apartment because that's where they chose the space to live, so it's close to the schools they want for the kids and stuff like that. But they're in post furnishings, and in France, when you're being in post furnishings, trust me, it's not something you want to sit on. So they'd be like, "Okay, we need to make this better, so please come and give
We're
us a
not
hand." But
exactly all laying around watching
yeah,
Netflix on this sofa,
yeah, no,
right?
no, 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 no. And yeah, so like my first ever client, she was telling me like, I can't believe we've lived here for 2 years, and I had, if only I would have known, I didn't have to live for 2 years like this, uh,
Wow. Because she didn't know
because
where to get it,
she
where
didn't
to
know.
get
She was
different
like,
furniture and
no, and
things.
she didn't know, and she didn't know that like I was only starting the business then. She was like, I'm so grateful you're here because we still have 2 years on the contract, and I don't have to live like this for another two now. But
Yes.
so we ended up taking on the project, and then a few others like this. But it's one of those things where at the source, it's not even like people, like it's happened a lot to me, like people telling me, oh, I didn't even know it was possible to like find someone to do this here, because
Okay.
I've looked around, and like when you, even if you Google it, there's not that many.
And if you do find somebody, if you do Google it or whatever, and you connect with someone, it sounds like you're likely to describe your project, and they're like, well, if we're not doing the reconstruction, if we're not doing architecture, why are you calling me? Right? Like that's what I'm understanding from you,
Yeah,
right?
well, and this is why, like, even like in my intake form, very often people contact us, and within the description of their project, they're saying like, we don't know if you take on a project that small because it's only 3 rooms, or like we
Oh,
don't know if you take on, because in France the pricing model is also very different, meaning that here people very often base, because there's a lot of renovation, rather than, because there's obviously also a lot of old Parisian apartments needing a bit of a refresh. So there's like they very often, the firms here, cost on a meter squareage, and not just cost per meter squareage or square footage, for the US, but they only take a certain amount of square foot minimum to be able to meet their minimum earnings,
right.
obviously. So they'd say to you like, if your flat is, I mean, so yeah, like inches and centimeters, gonna lose me here. But if you don't have a minimum of like 150 meters square or 80 meters square, like if it's a minimum of like a 3 bedroom apartment, and we won't take your project. Like it's just
Right.
there's a get go. Even if they could offer the furnishing service as well, they would need to be able to do the renovation to be able to take on the finishing
Right.
as well.
And they're going to expect that you're probably updating something of the actual space.
Yeah,
You're
like you'd have to
updating
paint
the kitchens or the
something, or yeah,
baths, or you're doing
yeah.
something, right?
At least painting.
Whereas yeah, like whereas a lot of people, probably like your first client, is relocated and just wants to make the place feel like her. She doesn't need to move the walls. She's not going to update somebody else's kitchen. She's there for 5 years and she's
That's it.
out, right?
That's it. She wants a family
And it
photo
probably
wall
doesn't
and a
even
pretty
have the
couch.
ability.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
that's
wants
it.
to even have the authority. I mean to
Oh yeah,
say,
yeah. Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Of
right.
course, but that's the thing. So it's pretty flexible in France in terms of like repainting a wall. Like I remember living in Australia. Often I've been told, "Oh no, no, you don't put a nail in that wall. That's not your wall." And I was like, yeah, but I pay the rent. It's my house for now. And they were like, oh, that doesn't, no, it's not running like this here. So yeah,
Oh my
In
goodness.
France, you can usually like either you ask your landlord, but people are usually flexible if you're updating. So either you put it back, or like if it's
Right,
white, put
but
it
they're
back
not
white. Or
investing in construction in somebody
no,
else's apartment,
of
right?
course not. No, no, no.
Yeah,
And
right,
like
right,
it was
right.
something that I thought at the beginning, I thought we'd have a lot of people renting and on contracts. And turned out like 95% of our clients are actually owners and actually long-term people that invest here
Mm.
and own apartments or
Well, and
houses
it's
here.
the same thing, right? They have a home. It's like it's so funny because I can't imagine anybody here that knows interior design and is familiar with the world and the industry, the interior design industry here in the US, thinking, of course you can find an interior designer. Like it's like the easiest thing in the planet. You just got to, the hardest thing is picking which one,
Yeah, that's it.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. As
and that's
and if
yeah.
you want just your bedroom done or just your powder bath done, you can get that done, right?
Yeah, of course, and that's something that also like feels unfair, and it's like discussions we're obviously having, and with like obviously as we mentioned at the beginning, finding a little the support community, the network of designers and Anglo designers that that love to that I'm slowly building, but still chipping away at. It's like on a client end, it's so unfair. You don't get to look at the many portfolios. Obviously, it's such a personal thing. Style is
Right.
a personal thing, but also obviously then it's a personal approach to the designer in itself. It's so personal.
Right.
So like it's they're so limited in the choices of what's being offered to them. Like I've talked about this with some real estate agent recently, and they were saying like we have a fair few investors that come and buy for pied à terre here in Paris, and we're talking about they're like, oh, we love your projects, Cleo, and it's lovely, but they're definitely going on the antique French shabby chic version
Mm.
of Paris, and I'm like, yeah, that's not what I do. I'm not that girl. So and I think and the thing is, I don't know actual English speaking interior designers that do that. I can't even
Oh.
recommend a way to the person that would be meeting that style because I don't yet know her
Oh.
or him.
So definitely reach out to Cleo because she's got referrals for you, right?
Definitely do. Yeah, that's it. I've got people to send.
Exactly. Okay. So now thinking about how obviously attracting English speaking clients and doing a business model that is similar to what we're doing here, are all the conversations. I love it when I've talked to somebody who literally says, I'm like, listen to your show forever. Cause then I'm like, oh, we know the same things. Like, it's like talking
Don't
to
have to
like
repeat
somebody in
myself.
your family when you have a family reunion. We know all the aunts, we know all the uncles. So, you know, all the people on the show. There are people, right? So thinking about that, are you also structuring your process similarly? Like I did look on your website and you do have the process enunciated. So is like as far as fees, are you like are you doing flat fee? Are you doing hourly? Are you doing the square foot meter fee? How are you doing all of that, Cleo?
So absolutely based on an American model, and and we are doing a flat fee based on an hourly. So have an hourly setup and different points of hourly. So my fee, junior designer, and an admin fee, and then based of experience plus industry standards. I've scouted. We base our fees based on how much time it would require to design a space. Also because we've discussed this with the team and with my partner when he's been on board helping out with the business development, was the concept of, which I didn't find quite fair because the spaces are smaller here. Like I ended up working on very big homes, but which I thought I'd have to do a lot of space optimization, and turns out we've done really large spaces. So, so it wasn't something that we had to figure out so much. But for small spaces, and I've seen it, in high-end interior design in France, which exists also obviously. I've seen it a fair bit where you'd have a studio apartment redo or a one-bedroom apartment redo, and if you base your minimum fee of a minimum 3-bedroom, you never get to play with a very high-end small space. And like you have many hours of design going in a very intricate way and having to source many different kind of furnishings and layers that could go in within that space. And you could have a 3-bedroom apartment that needs 3 paint colors chosen and half of the furniture already existing, and you so it didn't make sense for me on the client end
that way.
Yeah, and I think it was just obviously the more effort that needs to go in within a space is the more we should be being paid for, and as much as if we don't need to be paid for that much because we can only source you a paint color and a new light, a console, and a mirror, and your whole space is changed, and just pay me for that, and happy days.
Right. Okay, so I love that you said that you're doing a flat fee based on your calculations of the hours it's going to take. It's not like a flat fee based on I picked a number. Seems like it should cost this much money, right? So I love that.
So yeah, it's definitely good for the clients coming from the US. We obviously don't have only American clients. We have English and international couples. We had a Venezuelan and German couple. We had UK French. You had a lot of people coming from all over the world. But I think, as you just said very well, there's so many unknowns in interior design and in picking an interior designer, especially when either you don't have much choice, as we just said, or either you just, and actually I think probably I'd say again 80-90% of our clients is the first time they're hiring an interior designer. So it's not like I've had a couple of clients that said, oh yeah, I hired a designer from West Elm when we moved in, but it was someone in store or something like this. It was very often we've been there first. So I think there was something reassuring in knowing that they always had a family member or a friend that would have had an interior designer, and that's similar. Yeah, it's not something completely new and out of the blue, and I feel like when you tell people, I'll tell you how long I think it'll take me, like any other kind of service, not necessarily luxury or high-end service, because obviously we are selling a luxury service, but if you're going to book a lawyer, how long does it take you to work? This is how much I'm going to pay you, and I think there's something that's easy to fathom in that sense, rather than how big is my apartment? What does that mean? How much, a lot of people take on percentage on construction as well, because of the architectural aspect of it. So very often the interior design work will be based on the contractor's fee, which again feels a little odd for me. So yeah, working when sometimes we very often we don't have to bring in contractors. We've done renovations as well, but if eventually a painter, and sometimes not even. So how am I gonna base my fee on a contractor that's never gonna exist? That's not
right. 100%. Yeah. So it's funny because, I think I always love it. And I think it's so funny when we catch ourselves making assumptions that are just like, oh, that was dumb. So here I am, your firm is marketing to English speaking people, but when you're like, oh, we work with, with German families and Venezuelan families and all these things, it's again that same model. It's like, if I am a German couple living in Paris, well, maybe I don't speak French, but I probably speak English. And so that's what you're talking about. It's like, and almost like you said with the couple that was from France and you did it in English. So, it's just like, oh, duh, LuAnn. Yeah. The whole world.
No, but I mean, most of I mean, there's a whole lot of you guys. I'm not gonna lie, and I like myself some Americans. Most of my expat friends turn out to be, most of them are Americans. I gravitate towards lots. But but I think there's a general assumption that there will be English speakers, but very often it will be international couples. So I've had a lot of American couple, but we're part of English speaking communities based in Paris. So I'm obviously not an American, but I'm an English speaking parent living in Paris, and my partner's
Yes.
Australian,
Yes.
and we have friends from a whole different backgrounds, and lots of different
Yeah.
international. Yeah, it's very very
Fun.
rich. Yeah.
Yes, it seems very fun, very, very fun. So anything like that you can think of, Cleo, that like a lesson that you've learned at running the business. Oh, I made that mistake once, and I'm not going to make that again. Or something that, again, with you having listened to the podcast for so long, anything that you just say, oh, this so and so, and she or he said this on the podcast, I took it to heart, and yada yada yada. Like, I mean, I obviously got to think about the beginning shows with Fred Berns were probably very speaking to you, getting your only right. But are there things that come to mind? Like, what I'm asking is for somebody who maybe this is the first episode they're ever hearing, and you're like, oh, this was a big lesson. I remember, like, I'm talking, keep talking, and so you can think of something, okay?
Yeah.
But I remember Sarah
Episode.
Brennan saying to me, yeah, I remember Sarah Brennan saying to me after the podcast, I guess I met her when the podcast was, I think, a year and a half old. And her saying, listening to Sandra Funk on the podcast was the third episode. And she just said she listened to that episode over and over and still does. You know what I mean? She just felt like she was like, oh, there's something going on here. There's people in my industry that know what they're doing and I can learn from them. So it's like a moment for her that she always recalls. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if you've ever heard me tell the story. I'll just say this one more story is what's so funny is I don't know this, right? And a lot of people have heard me tell the story how I met Sarah. I'm at home. It's like 2 nights before I'm going to High Point for, I think, the first time. And matter of fact, it really might have been my first time going to High Point. Maybe it was my second. I don't know. But she DMs me and she's just like, and she doesn't know me. We don't know each other. She's just like, oh, sorry to bother you, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if you'll get this message, but I'm thinking about going to High Point. I've never been. I'm in business 6 months. Do you think I should go? And I'm just like, whoa, like that is more than a DM. Like, I'm like, how do I, like, should you get on a plane, train, an automobile? And I'm like, I don't even know if you can get a hotel at this point. So then she comes back and she's like, no, 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 I live an hour away. I don't have to worry about all that. I'm like, okay. And I said, well, then, yeah, like, yeah, if you can drive into town and spend the day, spend the day. I said, but, do you know anybody in the industry? Because if you're just going to come and walk in circles, you're wasting your time. I mean, you've got time. If you've got time to waste and just interesting to do, it's like going to a museum. You don't care about the outcome. You just enjoy the experience, right? And so she was like, well, no, I don't know anybody. And interestingly, I was meeting Sandra on Monday morning, and this was probably Wednesday night. And Sandra was going to be doing her and a couple of other people were doing a panel discussion in Surya. And I told Sandra, I said, I'm going to come and see your panel discussion. And so I said to her, and I know Sandra, and I know she was bringing her whole team. So I said to her, and I'm not the person to show you High Point. I don't know one furniture line from another furniture line. So I said to her, I said, I'll tell you what, Sarah, be at Surya at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I said, and Sandra Funk is going to go on at 10. I'll introduce you to her and she'll introduce you to her team and you'll spend the day with them. And how I had no idea that this was her like hero incarnate, you know what I mean? That I'm like hooking her up with, And so it's just a funny kind of a story from the podcast. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and that's the
So
thing. Like, I think
just
there's just
curious. Yeah.
I think there's just like so much of this, like so many of these moments that if you don't force yourself to go and get, like, she reached out, she took the step.
Yeah.
She was 6 months in business. Like, you can either be scared for 10 years or you can give it a go after 6 months. You can, or five, whatever it is, 5 years after whatever it is that you've been in business. But one of the things that I know, and I remember, I can't actually can't remember exactly who said that on the podcast, but it was definitely on your podcast. And I remember hearing someone saying, when I was still living in London, I was transitioning into interior design, and I was hearing someone saying, and it was obviously I was working at the same time in a different industry. I was in luxury hospitality management, and and I remember the designer. I'm wondering if it was an Amber Lewis, one of her first podcasts, and she was saying, um, "I know that if you don't do the due diligence of doing the research, doing the work, going and getting the things yourself, someone else will be doing that instead of you. There will be another designer doing all the
Mm,
research. There will be another person reading all the books. There will be another person learning all the brands, learning all the catalogs. And it's only up to you to do you and to do this." And I remember at the time going like, oh, wow, I'm really not doing enough. I'm not doing enough now if I want to give myself the chance of
yeah.
doing it better later. And I was like, okay, I've got to pick up more books, and I've got to, listen to more podcasts, and I've got to research more, and I've got to, you know, like open my mind to all things design, because no one else is going to do that for me. I'm supposed to be a
Yes.
walking encyclopedia of
Mm,
furnishings and designs and
mm.
understanding of space. And if I'm not going to teach myself, I'm not going to school for it now. I'm well past that educating stage, and so if I'm not going to do that, no one else is going to do that for me. So up to me to really like do the work and put the work in. And yeah, so I have been.
Yeah. And are you saying that that designer that said that was a London designer?
No, I think it was Amber Lewis.
It doesn't surprise me that it was Amber
Yeah.
because my biggest takeaway from talking to her both on and off air was just drive, just
Yeah,
absolute
because
drive.
no
Like,
one else is
I
going to
am
do it for
getting
you.
this done.
No one else is
Yep.
going to do it for you.
Yeah.
You got to get up
Yeah.
in the morning and
Yeah.
go to bed at
And
night,
it's
and in the
interesting.
middle.
Yeah. It's interesting because there are several people over the years of the podcast that stand out as just, oh, get out of the way. That's a steamroller coming. Like
Mm.
they just, and it's not a better or worse.
No.
There's just a take no prisoners type of a feeling like I'm creating an empire and
Yeah.
you might not believe it with me right now, but sit and watch, you
Yeah.
know what I
Mm.
mean? And others, do the work, show up every day and do the work and do the things. And then they're like, oh, I'm onto something here. Like, I don't think there's just like designer decorator. I don't think it matters the path that you take. I don't think it matters if you decide at the beginning that it's going to be this thing, or if you just show up and do the good work. Yeah, you know me. I believe you should have some kind of a plan. I think you should have a plan for the week, the month, the year, maybe 2 years. But it's interesting when you meet those that Vanessa De Leon was that way too.
Mm.
Vanessa De Leon, she was a young kid when I interviewed her, and
Mm.
she was like, I want to be the Latina Martha Stewart. And I
Yeah,
just thought to myself, and you're going to be like,
yeah, and that's the thing. You just see it,
because
and I
she
mean,
just was
like,
doing all the things.
yeah, and you obviously meet all of them,
Yep.
like so. And I think, and as much as you've heard it, and I've listened to it on the podcast, it's not everyone has the same intention. Like you don't need to have the
No,
intention of wanting to have the firm and the 90 people
nope,
employee and the warehouse and the
nope.
shop and the storefront, and you could just want to have the boutique firm and 3 people in your team and do that for 15 years and
That's
service a
right.
certain type of client. So there's such a world for everyone to be able to pick and choose
That's
what's
right.
what's the aim. And I
Well, and we
think
have
that's just
Rachel.
the
Yeah, no, and we have Rachel Moriarty, who's like, I don't want any employees.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you know
That's
what
the
I mean?
thing.
Like,
Like,
she just
yes,
doesn't want any.
solo work.
Yeah,
Yeah, solo
yep.
work is good for a
It's
lot of them. Yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's just as long as you got your
hmm
goal in mind, if you can define that goal, if you can know what's your aim, and it's obviously hard, like you've been asked when you're 15, what do you want to do when you grow up? And when you're 20, 25, 40, like, like my mom's 65 and she's like, I don't know what I want to do when I'm grown up. So I think it's so I think it's just a better perspective. It's just being able to, if you can at least have some sort of aim into what it is that you'd like
yes.
to be doing within your work. At least, like, how do you see
hmm
yourself? How do you see your ideal day being? Like, how do you see your ideal day being
hmm
in 6 months, in 2 years, in 5 years? I know I want to work with people. I always knew I wanted to work with people. I knew like I wasn't going to do solopreneurship at all. I've worked in teams of
mm
15, 20. I've managed teams of 15, 20 for almost a decade. And I was like,
Mm.
I need to speak to even think. I need a brainstorm. I need to be able to bounce things back and forth. So from the very get go, I had people on because I was like, I can't just be me and my brain. I'm I'm gonna implode. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. No,
define
I
define yeah.
agree. It's important. Yeah, it's important to know yourself first, right? Know yourself
Mm.
first, figure out your why, and then move. And it doesn't matter if it's the same or different than anybody else's. It just matters that it's true to you, that you're
Yeah,
doing what you really, the way you want to do it, right?
yeah.
So that's awesome. Well, I hope that we get some Parisian interior designers that reach out to you and tell you that they're there and they're willing to be collaborative over competitiveness.
Yeah.
And it would be great. It would be great. I mean, we're going to post this obviously in on Instagram, and it will be in LuAnn and Friends Facebook group. So it'd be fun for me to actually know if there are some
I'll
designers
definitely
that
let you
are
know.
there
I'll
and
definitely let
can
you know.
meet. Yeah, yeah,
I already have a
yeah.
couple that I know. There's a few that we try to meet up once in a while, but obviously we all have busy schedules. But no, definitely up for a French or even European get together once in a while. We're not very far from one
Yes.
another.
Yes.
And obviously anyone
Do
from the
you ever
US that
come
ever
to High
comes.
Point?
So I've never done High Point. I've gone to the Super Salone. I've done Milan. I've done obviously Maison et Objet. So if any of your listeners, if you guys come into
Mhm.
town, hit me up. I'm happy to meet up with American designers always.
That's awesome.
But yeah, no, I've never done High Point. Obviously, it's on my tick box to do, and I have a few American friends and clients that can facilitate with like a little holiday at the same time. So if ever I can do that,
Yeah.
I'll definitely let you know because I'd be reaching out to you and the whole rest of the crew.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Oh my goodness. Well, it was so fun getting to know you. I appreciate you for listening all these years. I really do. It's fun to know you and fun to know that the podcast and all of the people on it have helped you run your business and open your business and get it going and all the things. And it's interesting to learn about the way different cultures handle,
Mm.
interior design and go about it and stuff. So thank you, Cleo. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Luann. It's definitely a career milestone as far as I'm concerned, even if for 2 years only in business. It's been absolute pleasure to chat with you today. So I'm delighted. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. I could talk to Cleo forever. She is, first of all, the first Parisian I've had on the show. And although I know we have lots of listeners in France, I do hope she's not the last designer that I have the opportunity to speak with from France, right? I was fascinated to hear about her story, not only the overlaps with so many of the other stories that we've heard on the podcast over the years in terms of basic businesses, basic business best practices like niching and fine tuning the business side of things and learning the value of saying no, but also about the unique challenges that she has faced along the way. First off, huge kudos to you, Cleo, for answering the door to your niche when it was there knocking, right? Figuring out that special something that you do best, right, can be hard. And as we've said on the show plenty of times, it doesn't have to be something big or something crazy. I have seen plenty of designers get tripped up because they can't figure out what it is or should be because they're looking for something really, really big. Sometimes you have to get creative to make the niche happen for you, but sometimes it's right there, waiting for you, as long as you're willing to listen, hear the voices, right? Hear the nudges, hear the universe calling you, and take the plunge. That's what Cleo did. It made perfect sense to her. It was very clearly a need that wasn't being served. She stepped right into it. So smart. I also want to make sure that you caught the little nuance in her niche journey. She honed in very super specific at first, serving English speaking families in Paris. But then she backed that out a little when she realized she wanted to serve just a little bit broader audience of English speaking people in Paris. Okay. I love that this happened because it so much more happens the other way around. You want to niche, you don't know what to niche, and you don't niche specific enough. right? So, for example, you might try to niche as a sustainably focused designer without thinking much about how specific you actually can get. Or you might niche based on a specific style that you do well, but it's still actually fairly broad. And eventually, you start to see how smart niching is and how it doesn't close doors, but actually opens the right doors. And then you take it a step further, niching down even more. But Cleo actually did the opposite. She went super specific, did very well, and then realized it was okay to just open it up a little bit and let a little bit more people through the front door. It still felt very on mission to her. Okay. And that is a cool thing. This is when you listen to yourself. You listen to the data, you pay attention to what's happening in your business, you listen to your inside voice, and you observe what's happening in your business and you take it and you take action on it, right? I love it. It was fascinating to hear how Cleo talked about the interior architect versus the designer and the entire culture of the business of design in Paris, right? I mean, it was crazy. It makes so much sense when you think about the older Parisian homes that need to be updated and renovated and the value of the style that's there in that work. But it's not something that I would have previously thought about. I wonder how it hit you, if you were surprised by it, right? Clients, like she mentioned, who are relocating for just a few years, certainly don't want to renovate the entire place, but they're living somewhere that they want to feel like home. It makes so much sense. There's a lesson there that I want you to think about. We don't have to move to Paris to embrace this lesson, right? The key to any business is to find what's not being offered and figure out a way to offer it, right? And there are many designers out there. I get it. So it might be tempting to say that there isn't something that I can offer that somebody else isn't. But I promise you, there is. What if Cleo had taken that mindset? She would have missed this absolute gold mine opportunity, as Rachel Bozick would call it. That entire group of people who was waiting for her before she even realized it. Okay? Whoever you are, however long you've been doing this, whatever it is that you are doing, you have something special to offer. Okay? Maybe it doesn't speak as loud and clear cut and specific as Cleo's did to her, but if you can pay attention to what the people that you are working for and interacting with, what they're looking for, and then start to say, what's missing? What would really make it better for them? Then you can maybe find that gold mine for yourself, right? It reminds me of the episode way back with Susan Ingalls, who was the executive director of the Sustainable Furnishings Council at the time. She shared some interesting data about consumer preferences. At the time of the interview, she said that 6 out of 10 consumers, when polled, were interested in sustainable furnishings for their home, for their decor. But they also learned in the polling that 6 out of 10 garden variety humans don't know how to find an interior designer that can provide that service for them, right? That's a goldmine opportunity, a chance to step in and offer exactly what people are, number one, actively needing and searching for, and number two, aren't finding, okay? So it might take some digging and talking to people about their experiences and maybe forming a new understanding of what they're missing out on. Like you have to listen, right? But if you can find something like that and it resonates with you, it feels good to you, right? Then you can have all the pieces of the puzzle to creating a well-designed business. Thank you so much, Cleo, for joining me. I was so excited to speak with you and to learn about business in Paris and how it runs there and all the things. And I know you other international designers are out there, okay? I see the stats. I know where my listeners are. So if you are a longtime listener like Cleo is of the show and you have a perspective that you can share from your corner of the globe, please know that you are welcome and invited. This does not have to be just centered on American and Canadian designers, all right? So you can go on my website and fill out the submission form for Be on the Podcast. Okay, totally interested in learning about the business of design around the globe. And also, if you are in my international community, I would love to meet you in person. And in fact, I have just the opportunity for you to do that. February 19th to 23rd, I will be at the RNT 2024 conference, and I will be speaking there, and I will be speaking specifically to interior designers and architects. Now, this conference is the entire world's leading trade fair and conference for roller shutters, doors and gates, and sun shading systems. And the conference is held in Stuttgart, Germany, and I am going to be there. So if you are in my international community and you want to come to Germany, please stay tuned as we, over the next coming weeks, we'll be releasing the information and how to sign up and all the things. And, it's supposedly an amazing event to be at, amazing for resources and just such a large scale type thing that we can hardly even imagine here in the States. And so I'm really looking forward to what I'll learn and the people I'll meet, but they are going to grab the designers and the architects in the group, and we're going to niche down and have a conversation with you in Germany. All right. So I'll tell you the other thing. What I would love is that not just me and you to get a chance to meet each other, but for you as an international designer to have an opportunity to come together and meet other designers so that you know that you have this collaborative community of designers. I know that Cleo would love to find some colleagues that you can interact and you can meet up with, just like we have here in the US and Canada. We're constantly getting together at High Point and Las Vegas Market and all the things. So if you are craving community and you are out there in the international community, obviously we're talking about Europe here, then come on over and let's get it together and let's get you guys together, okay? All right, I'll put some information in the show notes about this conference, but please, if you're on my email list, if you're on my email list, you know what I'm doing and where I'm going, okay? And you can go right to my website, LuAnnandCleo.com, and click on Put Me on the Email List. All righty, well, thank you, Cleo, for showing up and for, reaching out and all the things. I love this conversation. I love learning. For me, it's always about the business, right? So it was like, a completely different business model over there in France. That's so cool to learn and understand. Totally, totally interesting. All right. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. I am so grateful that we do this together. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Nigara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNigara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.